Emergency blood needed. The nurse shouted and the CEO ran in, only to see his ex in labor with his twins. Hi, my beautiful family. Let's begin with a prayer, full of love and faith for me and for you. Dear God, as I walk through this season of healing, stay close to me, guide every hand that cares for me, and fill my heart with strength. And Lord, bless my entire YouTube family, each precious soul who listens, prays, and loves. Cover them in peace, joy, and endless protection. Amen. This is your Mr. Peter. I'm still in New York receiving treatment, but I want you to know, I feel your love with every heartbeat. Being away from you is not easy. Your voices, your prayers, your support, they're my comfort. I know some of you may feel sad not hearing me today, and that's okay. But please, my beautiful family, don't walk away from the story because of this message. Sometimes new family members leave too soon. If you like, skip the intro, but please stay for the story. And if something touches your heart, I'd love to see your words in the comments. I hold them close. While I heal, James is here to guide you with gentleness and care. Please keep praying for me as I carry all of you in my prayers too. Now let's begin this story, with hearts wide open and love flowing between us. Always.
The scream that shattered the sterile silence of Manhattan General Hospital would haunt Sebastian Winters for the rest of his life, because it came from the only woman who had ever owned his soul. Sebastian's Italian leather shoes echoed against the polished marble floor as he strode toward the emergency wing, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd received the call 23 minutes ago. Emergency blood donation needed, AB negative, life or death situation. As one of only 12 AB negative donors in the city and a man who'd built his empire on being indispensable, Sebastian never questioned such calls. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for the sight that awaited him in Trauma Bay 7. Dr. Serafina Cross lay on the surgical table, her rich mahogany skin glistening with perspiration, her usually controlled features contorted in pain. Blood stained the white sheets beneath her as medical personnel swarmed around her with urgent precision. But it was her eyes that destroyed him, those same chocolate-brown eyes that had once gazed at him with infinite tenderness now held nothing but agony and terror as she fought to bring 2 lives into the world while her own hung by a thread. "Jesus," Sebastian breathed, the word barely audible above the symphony of medical equipment and urgent voices. "Sir, you need to maintain distance," a young nurse said, intercepting him with professional authority despite his imposing presence. "I'm the donor," Sebastian replied, his steel-gray eyes never leaving Serafina's face. "A B negative, Sebastian Winters." Dr. Marcus Reed looked up from his position, relief flooding his weathered features. "Thank God, she's hemorrhaging badly. Placental abruption with twin complications. We need your blood immediately, or we'll lose all 3. All 3. The words struck Sebastian like a physical blow. Twins. Serafina was delivering twins, and from the desperation in Dr. Reed's voice, Sebastian might be witnessing the death of the only woman he'd ever loved, and 2 children who could be, God help him, his own. 5 years. 5 years since Serafina Cross had disappeared from his life without explanation, taking his heart and his faith in love with her. 5 years since he'd last seen those surgeons' hands that were now gripping the bed rails, the same hands that had once traced patterns across his skin in the quiet hours before dawn. 5 years since he'd heard her voice whisper his name, the same voice now calling out in pain that cut through him like a scalpel. "Sebastian." Her voice, weak but unmistakable, somehow reached him across the controlled chaos. Their eyes met, and 5 years of carefully constructed emotional armor crumbled in an instant. In that moment, all his wealth, all his power, all his success meant nothing. She was here. She was real. And she might be dying. "I'm here," he said, moving closer despite the medical team's protests. "I'm right here, Sarah." The nickname slipped out unbidden. No one else had ever called her that. It had been his alone, whispered in moments of intimacy, murmured over breakfast when the world outside his penthouse didn't exist. "The babies," she gasped, her hand reaching out blindly. Sebastian caught it without thinking, her familiar touch sending electricity through his entire nervous system. "Please, Sebastian, promise me." "They're going to be fine," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "You're all going to be fine." Dr. Reed was already drawing blood from Sebastian's arm with practiced efficiency. "Type and cross-match confirmed. Get me 4 units ready for immediate transfusion, and prep, or 3 for emergency C-section." The next few minutes passed in a blur of medical terminology and controlled chaos. Sebastian found himself pushed to the side as they prepared Serafina for surgery, but he couldn't look away. Even in crisis, even after 5 years of separation, she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Her hair, longer now than he remembered, spread across the pillow like black silk. Her lips, the same lips that had driven him to distraction with their softness, were pale but still perfectly shaped, and her eyes, those eyes that had haunted his dreams, kept finding his across the room. "Are you the father?" Dr. Reed asked quietly as they wheeled Serafina toward the elevator. Sebastian's throat closed. Was he? The timing could be right if she'd gotten pregnant right before she left. But she'd been gone for 5 years, and these were clearly newborns she was delivering now, so either she'd moved on with someone else or— "I don't know," he admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. As they waited for the elevator, Serafina's hand found his again. "Don't leave," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please don't leave me alone." The elevator doors opened and Sebastian made a decision that would change his life forever. "I'm not going anywhere." The surgical floor was a different kind of hell. Sebastian paced the waiting room like a caged panther, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled from running his hands through his dark hair. His tie hung loose around his neck, and his white shirt was stained with Serafina's blood from when he'd held her hand. The other waiting families gave him a wide berth. Something about his intensity, his barely contained energy, warned them to keep their distance. 2 hours. 2 hours of not knowing if the woman he'd never stopped loving was alive or dead. 2 hours of wondering if he was about to become a father to twins he never knew existed. 2 hours of facing the truth he'd spent 5 years denying. He was still completely, helplessly, desperately in love with Dr. Serafina Cross. His phone buzzed with messages, board meetings he was missing, deals waiting for his approval, an empire that needed his attention. Sebastian turned it off. For the first time in 5 years, something mattered more than Winters Medical Enterprises. "Mr. Winters." Dr. Reed appeared in the doorway, still in his surgical scrubs. Sebastian's heart stopped. The doctor's expression gave nothing away. "How is she?" "She's alive. Weak, but alive. We managed to stop the bleeding, and she's stable now." Sebastian's knees nearly buckled with relief. "The babies are in NICU, but they're fighters. A boy and a girl, 5 pounds each." A boy and a girl. Sebastian's hands trembled as the reality hit him. Can I see her?" Dr. Reed studied him carefully. "She's asking for you, but Mr. Winters, I have to ask. What's your relationship to Miss Cross?" "For her medical records." Sebastian looked through the window toward the recovery ward where Serafina lay sleeping and felt something fundamental shift in his chest. What was his relationship to her? Ex-lover? The father of her children? The man who'd never gotten over her? "She's the mother of my children," he said quietly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "And I'm going to marry her." Dr. Reed raised an eyebrow. "Have you discussed this with her?" Sebastian's mouth curved in the first genuine smile he'd felt in 5 years. "Not yet, but I've got the rest of my life to convince her." As he walked toward her room, Sebastian Winters, billionaire, CEO, man who controlled medical empires, felt more terrified than he'd ever been in his life, because behind that door lay his future, his heart, and the answers to 5 years of questions that had nearly destroyed him. The woman who had walked away was back, and this time Sebastian was never letting her go. Chapter 2. Ghosts of Gilded Promises. The first time Sebastian Winters saw Dr. Serafina Cross, she was elbow-deep in his 8-year-old nephew's chest cavity, fighting death with the precision of a master and the determination of a warrior. "Pressure's dropping," announced the surgical nurse, but Serafina's hands remained perfectly steady as she worked to repair the complex heart defect that had brought little Tommy Winters to the brink of death. Sebastian watched through the observation window, his palms pressed against the glass, leaving ghostly prints that would remain long after the surgery ended. His brother Marcus had begged him to use his connections to secure the best pediatric heart surgeon in the country, and Sebastian had delivered Dr. Serafina Cross, the youngest department head in Manhattan General's history, whose reputation for saving impossible cases was legendary. What Marcus hadn't mentioned was that she was absolutely breathtaking. Sebastian watched through the observation window, his palms pressed against the glass, leaving ghostly prints that would remain long after the surgery ended. His brother Marcus had begged him to use his connections to secure the best pediatric heart surgeon in the country, and Sebastian had delivered Dr. Serafina Cross, the youngest department head in Manhattan General's history, whose reputation for saving impossible cases had made her a legend in medical circles. What Marcus hadn't mentioned, what the medical journals never captured, was that she moved like a dancer, even in surgery. Every gesture was precise, economical, beautiful. 4 hours later, Dr. Cross emerged from the OR with exhaustion etched into her elegant features, but triumph blazing in her dark eyes. The repair was successful, she told Marcus and Sebastian, pulling off her surgical cap to reveal hair that fell in soft waves past her shoulders. "Tommy's going to live a completely normal life." Marcus broke down in tears of relief, but Sebastian found himself stepping forward, his business instincts engaging. "Dr. Cross, I'd like to discuss expanding funding for your department's research. Perhaps we could continue this conversation over dinner?" She tilted her head, studying him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through his practiced charm. "Mr. Winters, I don't discuss hospital funding over social meals." "Then let's make it purely social," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to the low, persuasive tone that had sealed countless deals. "No business, just dinner." For a moment he thought she might refuse. Then her lips curved in a smile that made his pulse quicken in a way no business negotiation ever had. "Tomorrow night, 7:30. But I choose the restaurant and we split the check." She chose a small Italian place in Little Italy. Not the kind of establishment where Sebastian usually conducted his romantic campaigns, but somewhere authentic, intimate, real. The candles flickered between them as they shared wine and conversation that flowed like water finding its course. Serafina was brilliant, not just medically, but intellectually curious about everything. She challenged his assumptions about healthcare policy, made him laugh with stories about her residency disasters, and listened with genuine interest when he talked about the business side of medicine. Unlike the women he usually dated, she asked follow-up questions, remembered details from previous conversations, and had opinions that weren't calibrated to please him. "Why did you become a heart surgeon?" Sebastian asked, leaning back in his chair, genuinely intrigued. "Because hearts don't lie," she said, her expression growing thoughtful. "You can't fake cardiac function. When a heart is damaged, it shows. When it's strong, it endures everything. When it loves—" She paused, meeting his gaze directly. "When it loves, It transforms the entire body's chemistry. Sebastian reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The touch was electric, immediate. I'd like to understand that kind of transformation. It's not something you can understand intellectually, she said softly. It's something you have to experience. Are you offering to be my teacher? Her smile was both shy and bold. I don't know if you're ready for that kind of education, Mr. Winters. The courtship that followed unfolded over 3 months of careful discovery. Sebastian was accustomed to relationships that followed predictable patterns: expensive gifts, exclusive events, physical attraction that burned hot and fast. But with Serafina, everything was different. She refused his expensive gifts, choosing instead to treasure the handwritten notes he left in her locker at the hospital. She didn't want to be seen at high society events. She preferred quiet nights in his penthouse, cooking together and talking until dawn. Their first kiss came 3 weeks later, after she'd worked a 36-hour shift, saving the life of a homeless man who'd suffered a massive heart attack. Sebastian had waited for her in the hospital parking garage, knowing she'd be exhausted and wanting to drive her home. When she saw him leaning against his Mercedes, still in his $1,000 suit despite the late hour, she started crying. "Hey," he said softly, pulling her into his arms. "What's wrong?" "I couldn't save him," she whispered against his chest. "I did everything right, but his heart was just too damaged." Sebastian tilted her chin up, looking into her tear-filled eyes. "You tried. You gave him every chance." "That's what heroes do, Sarah." When she kissed him, it was with 5 weeks of suppressed longing, desperate gratitude, and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. Sebastian kissed her back with equal fervor, pouring all of his carefully guarded emotions into the connection between their lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian knew with absolute certainty that his life had just changed forever. "Take me home," she whispered. "Your place or mine?" "Yours. I want to see where Sebastian Winters goes when he's not being a billionaire." His penthouse revealed more about him than any business magazine profile ever could. The space was elegant but warm, filled with books instead of trophies, family photos instead of awards. Serafina moved through his living room like she belonged there, her fingers trailing over his belongings with reverent curiosity. "You're not what I expected," she said, picking up a framed photo of him with Tommy at a baseball game. "What did you expect?" "Someone colder, more calculating." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Someone who couldn't look at me the way you're looking at me right now." "How am I looking at you?" "Like you're already in love with me." The words hung between them like a challenge. Sebastian moved closer, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "What if I am?" "Then you're in trouble," she whispered, "because I'm already in love with you too." They made love that night with a passion that consumed them both. Sebastian had been with beautiful women before, but nothing had prepared him for the way Serafina responded to his touch, like she was coming alive beneath his hands, like every caress was awakening something sacred within her. He worshipped her body with his mouth and hands, memorizing every curve, every sensitive spot that made her gasp his name. When she moved above him, her dark skin luminous in the moonlight streaming through his floor-to-ceiling windows, Sebastian felt something inside him break open, some carefully constructed wall around his heart crumbling to reveal a capacity for love he never knew he possessed. Afterward, as she lay sleeping in his arms, Sebastian made promises to the darkness that he'd never made to another living soul. He would protect her. He would cherish her. He would build a life around her that would make her forget she'd ever lived without him. For 18 months they were inseparable. Sebastian scaled back his business obligations to spend more time with her. He attended her medical conferences. She accompanied him to charity galas. He learned to cook her favorite Moroccan dishes. She learned to appreciate the opera. They talked about marriage, about children, about growing old together in the penthouse that had become their sanctuary. The proposal was planned for Christmas morning. Sebastian had commissioned a custom ring, a ruby surrounded by diamonds, as fierce and beautiful as her heart. He'd arranged for her entire family to fly in from Chicago as a surprise. The ring was hidden in his study, waiting for the perfect moment. But on December 15th, Serafina disappeared. Sebastian came home from a business trip to find her gone. Clothes, toiletries, the small personal items she'd gradually moved into his space. No note, no explanation, no forwarding address. When he called the hospital, they told him doctor. Cross had requested an immediate transfer to their Chicago location. Personal reasons, they said. No, they couldn't provide contact information. For weeks, Sebastian searched for her with desperate intensity. Private investigators, former colleagues, hospital administrators, anyone who might know where she'd gone. But Dr. Serafina Cross had vanished completely, leaving behind only the ghost of her perfume on his pillows and a void in Sebastian's chest where his heart used to be. The betrayal shattered something fundamental within him. She'd made him believe in love, in partnership, in the possibility of building something beautiful with another person. Then she'd walked away as if their 22 months together meant nothing, taking with her not only his heart, but his faith in human connection itself. Sebastian threw himself into his work with ruthless intensity, building his medical empire into a global powerhouse. He dated beautiful women, attended social events, played the part of the eligible bachelor. But inside, he remained frozen in time, locked in the moment when he'd realized that the woman he'd planned to spend his life with had chosen to leave him instead. Now, 5 years later, as Sebastian sat in the recovery room watching Serafina sleep, all of those memories crashed over him like a tidal wave. The woman who had walked away without explanation was back, having nearly died giving birth to twins who might be his children. And despite 5 years of anger, 5 years of bitter disappointment, 5 years of telling himself he was better off without her, Sebastian knew the truth. He had never stopped loving her. Not for a single day, not for a single moment. And now that she was back, he was going to get his answers, even if they destroyed them both. Chapter 3. Between Life and Vengeance. The sound of Serafina's heartbeat on the monitor was the most beautiful symphony Sebastian had ever heard, each steady beep a promise that she was alive, that she was fighting, that she hadn't left him again. He'd been sitting beside her hospital bed for nearly 7 hours, watching the rise and fall of her chest, memorizing the way the late afternoon light painted golden highlights across her dark skin. The doctors had warned that blood loss and surgical trauma had severely weakened her, but Sebastian couldn't bring himself to leave. Not when she might wake alone, not when he'd spent 5 years believing he'd never see her again. His phone buzzed incessantly on the bedside table. Board meetings, acquisition deals, the endless demands of running a medical empire. But Sebastian ignored it all. For the first time in 5 years, Winter's medical enterprises would have to survive without his constant attention. Nothing mattered except the woman lying unconscious in the narrow hospital bed, her hand warm and familiar in his. "The babies," Serafina whispered, her voice hoarse from the intubation. Sebastian's head snapped up, his gray eyes meeting her newly opened brown ones. Even weakened by surgery and blood loss, she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "They're perfect," he said softly, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "A boy and a girl, 5 pounds each. The doctors say they're strong." Relief flooded her features, followed immediately by something else. Pain that had nothing to do with her physical condition. "You came," she said, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "You asked me not to leave." Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion. "Did you really think I would?" Serafina turned her head away, staring at the blank wall instead of meeting his eyes. I thought, after everything, you'd want nothing to do with me. Sarah. He waited until she looked at him again. Are they mine? The question hung between them like a sword. Sebastian watched every emotion flicker across her face. Fear, pain, something that looked like regret. When she finally answered, her voice was barely audible. Yes. The single word hit Sebastian like a physical blow. Joy, rage, confusion, and love crashed through him in waves. He was a father. The twins sleeping in the NICU 3 floors up were his children. For 5 years, he'd had children he didn't know existed. Why? The word came out harsher than he'd intended. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you disappear? Evangeline Pierce, Serafina said quietly, and Sebastian heard a note of fear beneath the exhaustion. Evangeline Pierce, Sebastian's former business partner and the woman who'd been systematically positioning herself as his most trusted advisor for the past 3 years. The corporate alliance had been built on mutual respect and shared goals, or so Sebastian had believed. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, Evangeline continued, her smile perfectly calibrated. I heard about the situation and wanted to offer my support during this difficult time. What situation? Sebastian's voice carried a warning. The hospital's legal department has raised some concerns, Evangeline said, moving closer with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to boardrooms and power plays. Emergency paternity claims can create complications for publicly traded companies. There are disclosure requirements, potential liability issues. Get out. Sebastian's voice was deadly quiet. Sebastian, as your business partner, I have a fiduciary responsibility to address potential corporate exposures, Evangeline continued smoothly. Of course, once proper paternity is established through appropriate legal channels, we can develop a suitable arrangement for all parties involved. Serafina struggled to sit up despite her weakness. This is a private medical matter. You have no standing here. Actually, I do. Evangeline's mask slipped slightly, revealing something cold beneath the professional veneer. Any personal decisions that might affect Sebastian's capacity to fulfill his corporate obligations become company business. And frankly, the optics of this situation are concerning. For a moment, Evangeline's composure cracked, revealing something ugly and desperate beneath the polished surface. You're making a mistake, Sebastian. She left you once. She'll do it again. And when she does, don't come crying to me. After she'd gone, the silence in the room was deafening. Sebastian sat back down, reaching for Serafina's hand, but she pulled away from him. She's right, Serafina said quietly. You should have the DNA tests done. You should protect yourself. I don't need tests to know they're mine. Sebastian's voice was fierce with certainty. I can see it in their faces, Sarah. They have your eyes and my stubborn chin. They're ours. Tears slipped down Serafina's cheeks. You don't understand. You can't want this. You can't want me back in your life, not after... After what? Sebastian leaned forward, his hands gripping the bed rails. After you disappeared without explanation? After you left me wondering what I'd done wrong? After you took my children and kept them from me for 5 years? His voice broke on the last words. I've been dying to know why, Sarah. I deserve that much. Before she could answer, a soft knock interrupted them. Dr. Reed appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Winters, the babies are stable enough for visitors if you'd like to see them. Sebastian looked between the doctor and Serafina, torn between his desperate need for answers and his overwhelming desire to see his children. Serafina made the decision for him. Go, she whispered. Meet your son and daughter. The NICU was a world of soft beeps, hushed voices, and tiny miracles fighting for life. Sebastian followed Dr. Reed to 2 isolettes positioned side by side and felt his world tilt on its axis. They were perfect, impossibly small, but absolutely perfect. The little girl had a head full of dark curls and skin the color of warm honey, a beautiful blend of her parents' features. The boy was slightly larger, with Sebastian's strong jaw already evident in his tiny face and his mother's elegant bone structure. Can I touch them? Sebastian's voice was thick with emotion. Of course, they're your children. Your children. The words hit Sebastian like a benediction. He reached through the ports in the isolette, his large hands impossibly gentle as he stroked his daughter's tiny fingers. She was so small, so fragile, but when his finger brushed her palm, she gripped it with surprising strength. She knows you, Dr. Reed said softly. Babies recognize their parents' voices, their touch. Sebastian moved to his son's isolette, repeating the gentle contact. The boy's eyes fluttered open, gray eyes exactly like Sebastian's own, and seemed to focus on his father's face with uncanny awareness. "What are their names?" Sebastian asked, unable to look away from his children. "She hasn't named them yet. She said she was waiting for someone, waiting for him." Even after 5 years, even after whatever had driven her away, she'd been waiting for him to name their children. Sebastian stood in the NICU for another hour, talking softly to his son and daughter, making promises about the life he was going to give them, the love he was going to shower on them, the way he was going to protect them from everything that could ever hurt them. By the time he returned to Serafina's room, his heart was so full it felt like it might burst. She was sleeping again, but her face was turned toward the door as if she'd been watching for his return. Sebastian settled back into the chair beside her bed, taking her hand in his. "I named them," he said quietly, not sure if she was awake enough to hear him. "Aria Rose and Elijah James, after your grandmother and my grandfather." Serafina's eyes fluttered open, tears spilling over. "You remembered." "I remember everything about you, Sarah. Every story you told me, every dream you shared, every promise we made to each other." Sebastian brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "What I don't understand is why you broke them all." She closed her eyes, fresh tears tracking down her cheeks. "I thought I was protecting you." "From what?" "From me. From the scandal. From everything that loving me would cost you." Sebastian stared at her, confusion and anger warring in his chest. "What are you talking about? What scandal?" But Serafina had turned away again, her body language closing him out as effectively as a locked door. "You should go home, Sebastian. You have a company to run, a life to get back to. I can handle this on my own. Like hell you can." Sebastian stood up, his patience finally snapping. "You just gave birth to my children after disappearing for 5 years. You nearly died in my arms 6 hours ago. And now you want me to walk away and pretend none of this happened? Yes?" The single word was like a slap. Sebastian stared down at her, seeing the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she refused to meet his eyes, and felt something cold and dangerous unfurl in his chest. "Well, that's too bad," he said, his voice soft and deadly. "Because I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. Not this time. Whatever game you're playing, whatever lies you've been telling yourself for 5 years, it ends now. Those children upstairs are mine, and so are you. And I'll be damned if I let you disappear again." He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, "Sweet dreams, sweetheart. Because tomorrow we're going to have a very long conversation about the past 5 years, and this time you're going to tell me the truth." As Sebastian walked out of the room, he pulled out his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to his head of security, arranging for round-the-clock protection for Serafina and the twins. The second was to his private investigator. "I need you to find out everything that happened to Dr. Serafina Cross between December 15th, 2019 and today," he said, his voice deadly calm. Every job, every address, every person she's spoken to. I want her life mapped out hour by hour. How deep do you want me to go, Mr. Winters? Sebastian looked back at the hospital room where the woman he'd never stopped loving was probably planning her next escape. All the way to hell if that's what it takes. Chapter 4. Threads of Truth Unraveling. The war between Sebastian Winters and the woman who'd shattered his heart began at precisely 6:47 a.m. when she attempted to discharge herself from the hospital against medical advice. "That's not happening," Sebastian said, blocking the doorway with his imposing frame. He'd spent the night in the uncomfortable hospital chair, catching fragments of sleep between checking on the twins and studying Serafina's face in the dim light. "Doctor, Reed insists you need at least another 48 hours of monitoring." Serafina sat on the edge of the hospital bed, fully dressed in clothes that someone had retrieved from her apartment, simple black pants and a cream sweater that somehow made her look both elegant and vulnerable. Her overnight bag sat packed beside her, a clear declaration of independence. "I'm fine," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I can recover at home. Home." Sebastian's voice was dangerously quiet. "You mean the one-bedroom apartment in Queens, the one with no elevator and 43 stairs you'd have to climb? The one with no help when you collapse from exhaustion trying to care for newborn twins?" Her head snapped up, anger flashing in her dark eyes. "How do you know where I live?" "I know everything, Sarah." Sebastian moved closer, his presence filling the small room. "I know you've been working at a free clinic in Harlem for the past 3 years. I know you live alone in a 4th-floor walk-up. I know you drive a 10-year-old Honda with a broken air conditioner and shop at discount grocery stores." His voice dropped to an intimate whisper. "I know you still drink your coffee black with exactly 2 sugars, and you still have nightmares that make you cry in your sleep." The color drained from Serafina's face. "You've been watching me?" "I've been loving you," Sebastian corrected, his gray eyes blazing with emotion. "Every single day for 5 years I've been loving you and hating myself for it. So yes, I kept tabs on you. Sue me." Before Serafina could respond, a warm voice interrupted from the doorway. "Well, this is cozy." Both Sebastian and Serafina turned to see a woman in her early 40s entering the room, tall, graceful, with kind eyes, and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately commanded respect. She carried a large bag and a travel cup of coffee, and her presence seemed to fill Serafina with both relief and anxiety. "Cordelia," Serafina breathed. Dr. Cordelia Harding entered with the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. Tall, elegant, with graying hair pulled back in a neat chignon, and eyes that had seen too much but remained kind. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd spent 20 years making life-or-death decisions. "You must be Sebastian Winters," Cordelia said, extending her hand with practiced professionalism. "Dr. Cordelia Harding, Chief of Cardiac Surgery at Northwestern Memorial. And before you ask, yes, I've heard quite a lot about you over the years." Sebastian shook her hand, noting the surgeon's grip, firm, steady, assessing. "Dr. Harding, thank you for coming." "Someone had to," Cordelia replied with pointed emphasis. "Since my colleague here seems to have forgotten that friendship sometimes requires showing up, even when, especially when, it's complicated." The slight reproach in her voice made Serafina wince. "Delia, I couldn't put you in the middle of—" "In the middle of what? A medical crisis, a family emergency." Cordelia's tone was gentle but firm. "Sarah, I've been your friend since we were interns pulling 36-hour shifts and living on vending machine coffee. Did you really think I wouldn't want to be here for the most important day of your life?" Sebastian watched the exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just a professional colleague, this was family, chosen family, the kind forged in hospital corridors and late-night emergencies. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. Cordelia moved to Serafina's side, her trained eyes assessing her friend's condition with medical precision. "You look like hell," she said bluntly. "I feel worse," Serafina admitted. "Good. That means you're not completely stupid." Cordelia turned to Sebastian. "Mr. Winters, could you give us a few minutes? I need to examine my patient." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving her alone." "I'm not asking you to leave the hospital," Cordelia said patiently. "I'm asking you to step outside for 10 minutes so I can have a private conversation with the woman who's been my closest friend for 15 years. After a long moment, Sebastian nodded. 10 minutes. Then we're all going to have a conversation about what happens next. Once Sebastian had reluctantly left the room, Cordelia closed the door and turned to face Serafina with an expression that mixed love, exasperation, and barely contained fury. "Are you out of your goddamned mind?" she hissed. "Delia, please. Don't you, Delia, please me." Cordelia began pacing the small room like a caged tiger. "You disappear for 5 years, refuse to tell me why, work yourself into the ground at that free clinic, and then when you finally need help, when you're bleeding out having his babies, you still don't call me. I had to read about it in the hospital network newsletter." Tears started flowing down Serafina's cheeks. "I couldn't drag you into this mess." "What mess?" Cordelia sat down on the bed beside her friend, taking her hands. "Sarah, what happened 5 years ago? What made you run from a man who was clearly crazy about you?" For a moment, Sebastian thought Serafina might finally tell the truth. But then her face closed off, that familiar, stubborn expression settling over her features. "It doesn't matter now." "Bullshit." Cordelia's voice was sharp. "It matters to him, it matters to those babies upstairs, and it sure as hell matters to me. I watched you cry yourself to sleep for months after you left him. I watched you work 16-hour days trying to forget him. I watched you turn down every good man who tried to ask you out because you were still in love with Sebastian Winters." "I did what I had to do," Serafina whispered. "Did you? Or did you do what someone convinced you that you had to do?" Before Serafina could answer, Sebastian's voice came through the door. "Time's up." He entered to find both women looking guilty and defiant, a combination that immediately put his instincts on high alert. Cordelia stood, smoothing her professional mask back into place. "Mr. Winters, I've convinced Serafina that she needs more recovery time. However, she's refusing to stay in the hospital." "Then she'll recover at my penthouse," Sebastian said without hesitation. "Absolutely not," Serafina protested. "It's not up for debate." Sebastian's voice brooked no argument. "You nearly died yesterday, Sarah. You're weak, you're anemic, and you have 2 newborns who need their mother healthy. My penthouse has a full medical suite, round-the-clock nursing staff, and me." "That's exactly the problem." Sebastian moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. "What are you so afraid of? That you'll remember how good we were together? That you'll realize what you threw away?" "I'm afraid you'll realize what loving me costs," Serafina said quietly, the words seeming to slip out before she could stop them. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sebastian felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall of anger and hurt he'd built around his heart. "The only thing loving you ever cost me," he said softly, "was you." Cordelia cleared her throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we could discuss the practical arrangements. Serafina will need help with the babies, especially while she's recovering, and someone should stay with her for at least the first week." "I'll stay," Sebastian said immediately. "Sebastian, you have a company to run," Serafina began. "The company can survive without me for a week. You and our children are more important." "Our children." The possessive word sent a shiver through Serafina that she tried desperately to hide. But Sebastian saw it, and something predatory and satisfied flickered in his gray eyes. 2 hours later, Sebastian's private medical team had transformed his penthouse into a recovery suite that would rival any hospital. The master bedroom had been converted into a comfortable space for Serafina, with hospital-grade monitoring equipment discreetly hidden behind elegant screens. The nursery, a room that had stood empty and unused since Sebastian had designed it 5 years ago for the children he'd thought he and Serafina would have together, was now equipped with 2 state-of-the-art bassinets. Serafina stood in the doorway of the nursery, tears streaming down her face as she took in the carefully chosen details. The mobile of dancing stars that played Brahms' lullaby, the rocking chair positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon light, the bookshelf already filled with classic children's stories. "You kept it," she whispered. Sebastian stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I kept everything, Sarah. Your coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet, your favorite blanket on the couch, the book you were reading, still bookmarked on page 247. His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "I kept it all, like a shrine to what we used to have." She turned to face him, and the raw pain in his eyes nearly brought her to her knees. "Sebastian, don't," he said sharply. "Don't apologize, don't explain, don't give me any more half-truths. I can't handle it right now." The next few days fell into a rhythm that was both torture and heaven for both of them. Sebastian threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else in his life. He learned to change diapers, to warm bottles, to the perfect temperature, to recognize the difference between Arya's hungry cry and Elijah's sleepy fussing. He read to them from Shakespeare and discussed market trends as if they could understand every word. Watching him with their children broke Serafina's heart all over again. This was the man she'd dreamed of during those long, lonely nights in Chicago. Sebastian as a father, gentle and patient and completely devoted to their babies. The man she'd convinced herself didn't exist, couldn't exist, not for someone like her. "You're staring," Sebastian said without looking up from where he sat, feeding Elijah his bottle. "I'm watching," Serafina corrected from her position on the couch. "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "When I stare, I'm remembering what I lost. When I watch, I'm seeing what I never let myself hope for." Sebastian's hands stilled on the bottle. "And what's that?" "You being perfect at this. You loving them the way you—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "The way I loved you," Sebastian supplied quietly. "Love. Present tense. Because I never stopped, Sarah, and we both know you didn't stop either." That night, as Sebastian worked late in his study reviewing reports his assistant had sent over, he heard Serafina crying. The sound drew him like a magnet to her bedroom door, which stood slightly ajar. She was sitting by the window, holding Arya against her chest, tears streaming down her face as she whispered apologies to their sleeping daughter. "I'm sorry, baby girl," she murmured. "I'm sorry Mommy kept you from your daddy for so long. I'm sorry I was such a coward. I'm sorry I didn't trust him to love us enough." Sebastian pushed open the door, unable to stay away any longer. "Sarah?" She looked up, her face streaked with tears, and Sebastian felt the last of his carefully constructed defenses crumble. In 3 strides, he was across the room, sinking onto the window seat beside her and pulling both her and Aria into his arms. "Tell me," he whispered against her hair. "Please, sweetheart. Tell me what happened. Tell me why you left. Tell me how to fix this." For a long moment, Serafina melted into his embrace, letting herself remember what it felt like to be safe in Sebastian's arms. Then she pulled back, meeting his eyes with devastating honesty. "I left because someone convinced me that loving you would destroy you, that I would destroy you." Her voice broke on the words, and I believed them. Sebastian's blood turned to ice in his veins. Who? Who convinced you? But even as he asked the question, he already knew the answer. The pieces were falling into place: Evangeline's appearance at the hospital, her knowledge of the DNA tests, her barely concealed hatred for Serafina. "Evangeline," he breathed. Serafina nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "She had documentation, Sebastian. Financial records that seemed to show our relationship coinciding exactly with major medical contracts. Bank transfers that looked like payments for services rendered." Serafina's voice grew smaller with each word. "She said you'd been systematically using emotional manipulation to secure business advantages." "And you believed that?" Sebastian's voice carried more hurt than anger. "She knew details about our private conversations, about things I'd told you in confidence that somehow ended up in contract negotiations. She had photographs of you with other women, timestamps that suggested—" Serafina stopped, unable to continue. "That suggested what?" "That I was one of several women you were involved with simultaneously. That the whole relationship was part of some elaborate business strategy." Serafina finally met his eyes. "But what really convinced me was when she told me she was pregnant." Sebastian felt the blood drain from his face. "Pregnant?" "She said she was carrying your child, that you'd been sleeping with both of us, and she'd been willing to share your attention because she understood how these arrangements worked in your world. But she was concerned about me, said I was too naive, too emotionally invested, that continuing the relationship would hurt everyone involved." Sebastian stared at her, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. "Sarah, I was never sleeping with Evangeline. Our business relationship was purely professional, and she was never pregnant, with my child or anyone else's. But the evidence was fabricated." Sebastian's voice was steady now, certain. "Every document, every photograph, every detail she used to convince you I was manipulating you. It was all an elaborate lie designed to drive you away." As the truth settled between them, Sebastian made a promise to himself and to the woman in his arms. Evangeline Pierce had stolen 5 years of their lives, had kept him from his children, had nearly destroyed the only thing that had ever truly mattered to him. Now it was time for her to pay. Chapter 5. Dangerous Liaisons and Deadly Secrets. The storm that would destroy Evangeline Pierce began brewing the moment Sebastian Winters discovered the truth. But it erupted into a hurricane when she made the fatal mistake of threatening his children. Sebastian stood in his private office at Winters Medical Enterprises, staring out at the Manhattan skyline while his phone rang incessantly. He'd been avoiding calls all morning, unable to focus on anything except the cold fury burning in his chest. For 5 years he'd lived believing Serafina had abandoned him by choice. Now he knew she'd been manipulated, terrorized, driven away by the woman who occupied the office 3 floors below, the same woman who ran his public relations department with the ruthless efficiency she'd used to destroy his happiness. "Mr. Winters?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Pierce is here to see you. She says it's urgent." Sebastian's mouth curved in a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "Send her in." Evangeline entered his office like she owned it. Her platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, her designer suit tailored to perfection. She was beautiful in the cold, calculated way of expensive artwork, meant to be admired but never touched with genuine affection. "Sebastian, darling," she purred, settling herself into the chair across from his desk without invitation. "We need to discuss your little domestic situation." "My what?" Sebastian's voice was dangerously quiet as he turned from the window. "Your baby's mama drama." Evangeline crossed her legs with deliberate sensuality. It's becoming quite the topic of conversation among the board members. A secret love child scandal could be damaging to the company's reputation. Careful, Evangeline. Sebastian moved to his desk, his movements predatory and controlled. You're on very thin ice right now. Evangeline laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Oh, please. We both know this whole reunion is temporary. She left you once, Sebastian. Once that postpartum depression hits, once she realizes how much work two babies actually are, she'll be gone again faster than you can say child support payments. Is that what you told her 5 years ago? Sebastian asked conversationally. When you convinced her I was using her? For just a moment, Evangeline's composure slipped, revealing something ugly and desperate beneath the polished surface. Then she recovered, her smile turning razor-sharp. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't you? Sebastian opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. Because I have a very interesting conversation here with one doctor. Marcus Reed. It seems he remembers a certain blonde woman approaching him 5 years ago, asking very specific questions about hospital contracts and surgical schedules. A woman who claimed to be working for the medical board, investigating potential conflicts of interest. Evangeline's face went white, but she didn't back down. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. Sebastian opened the folder, spreading photographs across his desk. These are the fake documents you created, Evangeline. Bank transfers that never happened, contracts that were backdated, financial records that were fabricated so expertly it took my forensic accountants 3 days to prove they were false. Sebastian's private investigator, Marcus Kellerman, was a former FBI agent whose methodology was as thorough as it was discreet. He'd been working Sebastian's case for 72 hours when he called with preliminary findings. The fabrication is sophisticated, Kellerman reported from Sebastian's study while Serafina slept upstairs with the twins. Whoever did this had extensive access to your business systems, detailed knowledge of your negotiation patterns, and professional-level skills in document manipulation. How professional? The kind of expertise that suggests either corporate intelligence background or connections to people who have it. The financial records weren't just forged. They were integrated into existing systems in a way that would fool most forensic accountants on initial review. Sebastian felt a chill run down his spine. What about the pregnancy claim? No medical records, no insurance claims, no prescriptions, nothing to suggest Evangeline Pierce was ever pregnant during the time frame in question. But whoever fed her the information knew doctor. Cross was pregnant and used that detail to maximum psychological effect. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a crime of passion or jealousy. It was a calculated campaign designed to destroy his relationship with surgical precision. There's something else, Kellerman continued. I've been tracking Evangeline's activities since Dr. Cross left, and there are patterns that suggest this wasn't her only operation. I'm finding similar disruptions in the personal lives of at least 3 other high-net-worth individuals over the past decade. You're saying she's done this before. I'm saying she's a professional, Mr. Winters, and professionals usually don't work alone. She was wrong for you. Evangeline's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the vicious desperation beneath. She was a nobody, Sebastian. A surgeon from the wrong side of Chicago with no connections, no family money, no social standing. She would have dragged you down, made you ordinary. She made me extraordinary, Sebastian said softly, his voice more dangerous than any shout. She made me want to be better than I was. She made me understand what love actually meant, and you took that away from me. I protected you. You destroyed me. Sebastian's voice cracked with emotion. You cost me 5 years with the woman I was planning to marry. You cost me 5 years with my children. You cost me watching them be born, hearing their first words, seeing their first steps. Evangeline backed toward the door, finally understanding that she'd pushed Sebastian too far. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure you never hurt anyone I love ever again. That evening, Sebastian returned to his penthouse to find chaos. Serafina was pacing the living room with a screaming Elijah, while Arya wailed from her bassinet. Both babies were red-faced and inconsolable, and Serafina looked like she was on the verge of a breakdown. "I can't get them to stop," she said when she saw him, her voice thick with exhaustion and tears. "They've been crying for 2 hours. I've tried everything: feeding, changing, burping, singing. Nothing works." Sebastian immediately took action, scooping up Arya while maintaining his hold on both babies. "It's colic," he said, recognizing the specific pitch of their cries. "Doctor Reed warned us it might start around now." For the next hour, they worked together in desperate synchronization. Sebastian walked Arya around the penthouse, bouncing her gently while humming Bach under his breath. Serafina tried every soothing technique she knew with Elijah. Nothing worked. The babies continued to scream, their little faces screwed up in misery. "I'm a terrible mother," Serafina sobbed, finally sinking onto the couch in defeat. "I'm a surgeon. I should know how to fix this." "You're not a terrible mother," Sebastian said firmly, switching babies with her so she could try a different approach. "You're exhausted. You're still recovering from major surgery, and you're dealing with twins who have inherited both of our stubborn personalities." Despite everything, Serafina laughed through her tears. "Your stubborn personality, you mean?" "Please, Elijah has your 'I'll do it myself' expression down to an art form already." As if summoned by his name, Elijah suddenly stopped crying. He looked up at his parents with wide gray eyes, hiccuping softly. Arya, not to be outdone, also quieted, making soft cooing sounds as she stared at Sebastian's face. "How did you?" Serafina began. "They wanted both of us," Sebastian said quietly. "They needed to know we were both here, both taking care of them." The moment stretched between them, intimate and fragile. Sebastian was achingly aware of how close Serafina was sitting, how her hair had escaped its ponytail to curl around her face, how her lips were slightly parted as she gazed down at their now peaceful children. "Sebastian," she whispered, "I know." His voice was rough with desire and longing. "I know we need to talk about what happens next. I know we need to figure out custody arrangements and legal agreements and all the practical things. But right now all I want to do is kiss you until you remember why we were so good together." The confession hung in the air between them like a live wire. Serafina's eyes darkened, and Sebastian saw the exact moment when her careful control began to crack. "That's not a good idea," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Probably not," Sebastian agreed, leaning closer. "But I've had a lot of bad ideas lately, and they're starting to feel like the only honest things in my life." When the thunderstorm hit at midnight, both babies woke up screaming again. This time it wasn't colic. They were genuinely frightened by the sharp cracks of thunder that shook the penthouse windows. Sebastian and Serafina moved through the darkened apartment like partners in a well-rehearsed dance, each anticipating the other's needs without words. Sebastian was warming bottles in the kitchen when he heard Serafina's voice break. He found her in the nursery, holding both babies against her chest, tears streaming down her face as she tried unsuccessfully to comfort them. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "I can't be what they need. I can't be what you need. I'm going to fail them the same way I failed you." "You never failed me," Sebastian said fiercely, setting down the bottles and wrapping his arms around all three of them. "You loved me enough to walk away when you thought it would protect me. You loved them enough to raise them alone when you thought I didn't want them. You've never failed anyone, Sarah. You've just been carrying burdens that were never yours to carry. The babies gradually calmed in the safety of their parents' embrace, but Sebastian didn't let go. He couldn't. Having Serafina in his arms again, feeling her soft curves against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, it was like coming home after 5 years of exile. "Sebastian," she whispered against his neck. "I missed you," he said, his voice breaking. "God, Sarah, I missed you so much I thought it would kill me." When she lifted her face to his, Sebastian saw his own desperate longing reflected in her dark eyes. The first kiss was tentative, almost hesitant, as if they were both afraid the other might disappear. But when Serafina's lips parted under his, when she made that soft sound of surrender he remembered so well, Sebastian's control shattered completely. He kissed her like a man dying of thirst, pouring 5 years of longing and pain and love into the connection between their mouths. Serafina kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt as if she could anchor herself to him through sheer force of will. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "This is dangerous," Serafina whispered. "Everything worth having is dangerous," Sebastian replied. "The question is whether you're brave enough to risk it." Before Serafina could answer, his phone rang. Sebastian ignored it, but it rang again immediately. Then again. "Answer it," Serafina said, stepping back. "It might be important." Sebastian reluctantly checked the caller ID and felt his blood turn to ice. "It's hospital security." The voice on the other end was tense, professional, and absolutely terrifying. "Mr. Winters, we've had a security breach in the NICU. Someone attempted to access your children's medical records. We've increased security, but you should know." The person was asking very specific questions about their location and visiting schedules. After Sebastian hung up, Serafina stared at him with growing horror. Someone was trying to find the babies. "Evangeline," Sebastian's voice was deadly calm. "She's escalating." As if summoned by their conversation, Sebastian's phone buzzed with a text message. The number was blocked, but the message was crystal clear. "Some people never learn. Enjoy your happy family while you can." Sebastian showed Serafina the message and watched her face go white with terror. "She's going to hurt them," Serafina whispered. "She's going to hurt our babies." "No," Sebastian said, his voice filled with quiet menace. "She's not, because I'm going to destroy her first." As Sebastian made arrangements for enhanced security, as he put plans in motion that would systematically dismantle everything Evangeline Pierce had built, he made a promise to himself and to the woman he'd never stopped loving. The war Evangeline had started 5 years ago was about to end, and Sebastian Winters had never lost a war that mattered. Chapter 6. Hearts Behind Enemy Lines. The Manhattan Children's Hospital Charity Gala was supposed to be a celebration of medical advancement, but it became the night Sebastian Winters fired the first shot in a war that would reshape their world. Sebastian stood at the entrance of the Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom, striking in his custom tuxedo, his steel-gray eyes surveying the crowd of Manhattan's medical and social elite. Beside him, Serafina was breathtaking in a midnight blue silk gown that complemented her skin like liquid starlight. She'd been hesitant to attend, worried about leaving the twins despite round-the-clock security and Cordelia's watchful care. "We don't have to stay long," she said quietly, her hand resting on his arm. "Long enough," Sebastian replied, his voice carrying quiet determination. It's time people knew the truth about what happened 5 years ago. The ballroom was filled with New York's most influential people. Hospital board members, pharmaceutical executives, society mavens who controlled charitable donations with the flick of a diamond-adorned wrist. Everyone who mattered in their world was here, which made it the perfect venue for what Sebastian had planned. Evangeline held court near the auction display, resplendent in a white Valentino gown that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. She'd positioned herself strategically to be the center of attention, accepting congratulations for the record-breaking fundraising total. To everyone present, she looked like the perfect combination of beauty, power, and philanthropy. Sebastian knew better. He saw the predatory calculation in her smile, the way her eyes constantly searched the crowd for threats, the subtle tension in her posture that suggested a woman barely holding herself together. "She looks nervous," Serafina observed. "She should be," Sebastian murmured, leading her deeper into the crowd. For the first hour, they played the part of the reunited couple perfectly. Sebastian introduced Serafina as his partner, the mother of his children, the woman he'd never stopped loving. The reactions were immediate and telling. Some people were genuinely happy for them. Others whispered behind champagne flutes about scandal and drama, and a few looked between Sebastian and Evangeline with obvious anticipation of fireworks. Dr. Marcus Reed, the hospital's chief of obstetrics, approached them with genuine warmth. "Sebastian, Dr. Cross, how wonderful to see you both. How are the twins?" "Perfect," Sebastian said, his pride evident. "Aria's already showing signs of her mother's intelligence, and Elijah has inherited my stubborn streak." "They're beautiful babies," Serafina added, her face glowing with maternal love. "We brought pictures if you'd like to see them." As Serafina showed photos to Dr. Reed and several other colleagues, Sebastian noticed Evangeline watching them from across the room, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met, and she raised her champagne glass in a mocking toast before turning back to her admirers. The confrontation Sebastian had been orchestrating began during the speeches portion of the evening. He'd arranged to be introduced as a surprise speaker, supposedly to discuss his foundation's work with pediatric heart surgery. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sebastian began, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the ballroom, "I'm here tonight not just to support children's medical care, but to set the record straight about something that has haunted me for 5 years." The crowd quieted, sensing drama. Sebastian could see Evangeline at a table near the front, her face already tightening with alarm. "5 years ago, I was engaged to marry the most remarkable woman I'd ever met, Dr. Serafina Cross, the brilliant heart surgeon who saved my nephew's life." He gestured to where Serafina sat, and she rose gracefully to acknowledge the attention. "But someone convinced her that our love was a lie, that I was using her for business purposes. Tonight, I want that person to know their deception failed." The murmur that ran through the ballroom was electric with interest and speculation. The ballroom was now completely silent except for the auctioneer's shocked voice. Sebastian could feel every eye in the room focused on him and Evangeline, sensing the undercurrents of personal conflict that had nothing to do with charity. $200,000, Sebastian said calmly. Evangeline's face flushed red with rage. 500,000. The amount was so ridiculous that several people actually gasped. Sebastian let the moment stretch, allowing everyone to see Evangeline's desperation, her irrational behavior, her complete loss of control. "Going once," called the auctioneer uncertainly. "Actually," Sebastian said, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the ballroom, "I'd like to withdraw my donation." The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. It was unprecedented, unthinkable, for someone to withdraw an auction item mid-bidding. "You see," Sebastian continued, moving to the center of the room where everyone could see him, "I've recently learned that not everyone here tonight has the hospital's best interests at heart." Evangeline went white as Sebastian pulled out a thick manila envelope. 5 years ago," Sebastian said, his voice projecting with the authority of a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms, "someone in this room fabricated evidence to destroy a relationship that threatened their personal agenda. Someone forged financial documents, staged photographs, and manipulated innocent people to serve their own twisted purposes. Sebastian, what are you doing? Dr. Reed asked quietly. I'm telling the truth, Marcus, something that should have been told years ago. Sebastian opened the envelope, pulling out copies of the falsified documents. Ladies and gentlemen, I present evidence of fraud, forgery, and criminal harassment committed by someone we all trusted. He began distributing copies of the documents, explaining each fabrication in detail. The crowd pressed closer, their faces showing shock, confusion, and growing understanding as the scope of Evangeline's deception became clear. This is ridiculous, Evangeline finally exploded. Sebastian, you're having some kind of breakdown. Everyone knows you've been unstable since your little girlfriend came back into your life. My fiancée, Sebastian corrected, his voice cutting through her protests like a blade. The woman I was planning to marry 5 years ago, before someone convinced her I was using her for business purposes. He turned to address the crowd directly. Doctor, Serafina Cross didn't leave me by choice. She was terrorized into disappearing by someone who forged evidence of affairs that never happened, business deals that were legitimate but deliberately misrepresented, and financial arrangements that existed only in falsified documents. The murmur of the crowd was growing uglier, more hostile. Several board members were studying the documents with increasingly grim expressions. Evangeline made one last desperate play. He's lying. Sebastian Winters is so obsessed with that woman that he's fabricated this entire conspiracy theory rather than accept that she simply didn't want him. Then explain this, Sebastian said, pulling out his phone and connecting it to the ballroom sound system. This is a recording of your conversation with Detective Knox Danforth 3 days ago. Evangeline's voice filled the ballroom, clear and damning. I need you to find something we can use against her. Anything. Drug use, financial irregularities, patient complaints, anything that will prove she's an unfit mother. Sebastian won't listen to reason, so we need to force his hand. The silence that followed was deafening. Every face in the room was turned toward Evangeline, expressions ranging from shock to disgust to barely contained fury. You recorded me, Evangeline whispered. Detective Danforth recorded you, Sebastian corrected, and then he brought the recording to me, because even private investigators have ethical standards. Security appeared at Sebastian's subtle signal, moving to flank Evangeline as several board members approached with expressions that promised immediate termination and possible criminal charges. But Sebastian wasn't finished, as Evangeline was escorted from the ballroom in disgrace, as the crowd buzzed with shock and excitement over the most dramatic charity gala in Manhattan's history. He took Serafina's hands and dropped to one knee in front of 500 witnesses. Serafina Cross, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent ballroom. 5 years ago, someone stole our chance at happiness. They stole our wedding, our life together, our chance to raise our children as a family from the beginning. He pulled out a ring box, the same ring box that had sat in his desk drawer for 5 years, waiting for this moment. I can't get those years back. I can't undo the pain we've both suffered, the time we've lost, the moments we missed with our children. But I can promise you this. No one will ever come between us again. No one will ever hurt you or our family again. And I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you are the only woman I have ever loved, will ever love, could ever love. The ring was exactly as she remembered it, a ruby surrounded by diamonds, fierce and beautiful and absolutely perfect. Marry me, Sarah. Not because we have children together, not because it's practical or expected, but because I am lost without you. Because you are my heart, my soul, my everything. Because 5 years of trying to forget you only proved that I never could. Tears were streaming down Serafina's face as she looked into the gray eyes of the man who had fought for her, protected her, loved her through 5 years of separation and pain. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." The ballroom erupted in applause as Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her with all the passion and love he'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Serafina pressed her forehead against his. "I love you," she whispered. "I never stopped loving you." "I know," Sebastian murmured back. "I felt it every day, even when I was furious with you. I felt your love like a ghost in my chest, keeping me alive when I wanted to give up." Later that night, back in Sebastian's penthouse, they made love for the first time in 5 years. It was desperate and tender, passionate and healing, a celebration of survival and a promise of forever. Sebastian worshipped every inch of Serafina's body, like he was trying to erase the memory of every lonely night, every empty morning, every moment they'd been apart. "I missed this," Serafina breathed as Sebastian's mouth traced fire along her neck. "I missed you touching me like I was precious." "You are precious," Sebastian said fiercely, lifting his head to meet her eyes. "You're everything. My whole world is right here in this bed." When it was over, when they lay tangled together in the aftermath of their reunion, Sebastian traced patterns on Serafina's bare shoulder and made promises in the darkness. "No more secrets," he said. "No more lies, no more running, no more letting other people define our happiness." "No more," Serafina agreed, pressing a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "Just us, and our babies, and whatever comes next." But neither of them knew that Evangeline Pierce, disgraced and desperate, was already planning her final revenge. A revenge that would threaten not just their happiness, but their lives and the lives of their innocent children. The war was far from over. In fact, the most dangerous battle was yet to come. Chapter 7. When Passion Meets Purpose. The morning Sebastian Winters discovered the depths of his protective instincts was the same morning he realized what true love demanded of him. He woke to find Serafina's side of the bed empty, which had become routine. One of the twins often needed attention during the night, but when he followed the sound of soft humming through the penthouse, he found a scene that made his chest tighten with emotion. Serafina sat in the nursery's rocking chair, feeding Aria while Elijah slept peacefully in his crib. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning her dark skin luminous and catching the diamond on her engagement ring as she stroked their daughter's tiny fingers. She was humming a melody he didn't recognize, something soft and beautiful. "You're both so lucky," she whispered to Aria, "to have a daddy who loves you so much." Mommy was scared for a long time that she'd messed everything up, but Daddy never gave up on us, did he? Sebastian leaned against the door frame, his chest tight with emotion. This was everything he'd dreamed of during those 5 lonely years, his family, whole and safe and his. The woman he loved beyond reason, the children who carried the best parts of both of them, a future that stretched ahead like a golden promise. "Are you going to stand there eavesdropping all morning, or are you going to kiss me good morning?" Serafina asked without turning around. Sebastian crossed the room in 3 strides, bending to kiss her soft lips, while his hand rested gently on Aria's tiny head. "How did you know I was there?" "I can always feel when you're watching me," she said, her dark eyes warm with love. "It's like you're broadcasting love so loudly that my skin picks up the signal." "That's because I am," Sebastian said seriously. "I love you so much it feels like it might actually kill me." "Don't you dare die on me, Sebastian Winters," Serafina said fiercely. "I just got you back." The phone rang before Sebastian could respond, shattering the peaceful morning quiet. He almost ignored it. Nothing seemed important enough to interrupt this perfect moment, but the caller ID made his blood run cold. Hospital security. Again. Mr. Winters. The voice was tense, professional, terrified. We have a situation. Someone broke into Dr. Cross's former apartment last night. The police are calling it a burglary, but nothing was taken. They left a message. Sebastian's free hand clenched into a fist. What kind of message? Words cut out of magazines and pasted on the bedroom wall. It says, "Happy families don't last forever." Serafina must have seen something in his expression because she immediately stood, securing Arya against her chest with protective instincts that made Sebastian's heart clench. "What is it?" Sebastian ended the call and pulled both his girls into his arms, holding them like he could shield them from the world through sheer force of will. "Evangeline broke into your old apartment. The police can't prove it was her, but we know." Sebastian's voice was deadly calm. "She's escalating because the public humiliation wasn't enough. She wants to hurt us where we're most vulnerable." "The babies," Serafina breathed. "She's not getting anywhere near them," Sebastian said, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of a man who would burn the world down to protect his family. "I'm moving us to the estate in the Hamptons. Full security detail, private medical staff, complete isolation until this is over." "Sebastian, you can't just disappear from your company. Watch me." Sebastian was already pulling out his phone, making calls that would rearrange his entire empire around the single priority of keeping his family safe. Marcus can handle the board meetings. Jennifer can manage the daily operations. The company survived before I met you, and it'll survive while I'm protecting you. Within 6 hours, Sebastian had transformed his Hamptons estate into a secure sanctuary. The sprawling oceanfront property, which had sat mostly empty for years, suddenly bustled with discreet activity as security consultants installed advanced surveillance systems, medical professionals established a fully equipped nursery, and Sebastian's most trusted staff prepared for an extended stay. "This feels excessive," Serafina said, watching monitors being discreetly installed throughout the main house. "We can't live in fear because one unstable woman refuses to accept defeat." "We're not living in fear," Sebastian corrected, drawing her against his chest as they stood on the master bedroom balcony, watching their children sleep in the portable cribs beside them. "We're protecting what matters most while we figure out how to neutralize the threat permanently." The first week at the estate passed like a dream. Without the pressures of work, without the constant vigilance required in the city, Sebastian and Serafina fell into a rhythm that felt like the life they should have had from the beginning. They took turns with night feedings, explored the grounds with the babies in strollers, made love with a passion that seemed to grow stronger each day rather than settling into comfortable routine. "I never knew you could cook," Serafina said one evening, watching Sebastian prepare dinner in the estate's gourmet kitchen while she nursed Elijah. "I learned during the 5 years you were gone," Sebastian admitted. "I kept thinking about all the things I wanted to do for you, all the ways I wanted to take care of you. Cooking was one of them." "What were the others?" Sebastian's hands stilled on the cutting board. "Reading to you when you were sick, running you baths after your long surgeries, massaging your feet when you'd been standing in the OR all day." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Growing old with you. Watching our children graduate from college, get married, have babies of their own." Serafina's eyes filled with tears. "We can still have all of that. Can we?" Sebastian turned to face her, his gray eyes intense. "Sarah, I need you to promise me something. When this is over, when Evangeline is no longer a threat, promise me you won't disappear again. Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter what anyone tells you, you'll talk to me first." "I promise," she said without hesitation. "Sebastian, I will never leave you again. Not for any reason, not under any circumstances. You're stuck with me forever." "Forever isn't long enough," Sebastian said, crossing to kiss her with desperate tenderness. Their peace was shattered on the eighth day when Sebastian's head of security, Marcus Reed's brother, Detective James Reed, arrived with news that made Sebastian's blood run cold. "Evangeline Pierce has disappeared," he said without preamble. "She cleared out her apartment, liquidated her bank accounts, and vanished sometime in the last 48 hours. But before she left, she made some very concerning purchases." Sebastian felt Serafina tense beside him as they sat in the estate's study, the babies sleeping peacefully in their arms. What kind of purchases? "The kind that suggest she's planning something permanent," Detective Reed said grimly. "She bought a boat, a 40-foot cabin cruiser, cash transaction. She also purchased camping gear, non-perishable food supplies, and—" He paused, his expression grave. "And a gun. Legal purchase, background check cleared, but concerning given the circumstances." "She's planning to run," Serafina said quietly. "But not before she tries to hurt us." "That's our assessment," Detective Reed agreed. "We've got Coast Guard monitoring the waterways, but there are thousands of places to hide a boat between here and international waters." Sebastian stood abruptly, pacing to the windows that overlooked the Atlantic Ocean. Somewhere out there, Evangeline was planning her final revenge. The woman who had stolen 5 years of his life with Serafina was now threatening to steal their future entirely. "She's going to come here," he said with absolute certainty. "She knows about the estate. We've held company retreats here. She knows the layout, knows our routines." "The security," Detective Reed began. "Won't be enough," Sebastian finished. "Not against someone who has nothing left to lose." That night, Sebastian couldn't sleep. He stood guard by the nursery windows, watching the moonlight dance on the ocean waves, every shadow a potential threat. When Serafina found him there at 3 a.m., he looked like a man at war with himself. "Come to bed," she said softly, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "I can't protect you if I'm sleeping," Sebastian said, not moving from his vigilant position. "You can't protect us if you collapse from exhaustion either." Serafina turned him to face her, her hands framing his face with infinite tenderness. "Sebastian, look at me. We're safe. The security team is watching, the police are patrolling, and Evangeline would have to be completely insane to try to assault a fortified estate." "She is completely insane," Sebastian said grimly. "That's what makes her dangerous." Serafina studied his face in the moonlight, seeing the fear he was trying so hard to hide. This strong, powerful man who commanded medical empires and bent the world to his will was terrified, not for himself, but for her and their children. "Make love to me," she said suddenly. "Sarah, I'm serious. Right here, right now. Because if something does happen, if Evangeline does try to hurt us, I want to know that we had this moment. I want to remember what it feels like to be completely yours." Sebastian's resistance crumbled at the desperate love in her voice. He kissed her with 5 years of longing, lifting her onto the window seat as the moonlight painted their skin silver. When he entered her, slow and deep and reverent, it felt like a claiming, a promise, a desperate prayer to whatever gods might be listening to protect this perfect love they'd found their way back to. "I love you," Serafina gasped, as Sebastian moved inside her with exquisite tenderness. "Whatever happens, whatever she tries to do, remember that I love you more than my own life." "Nothing's going to happen," Sebastian whispered fiercely, his forehead pressed against hers as they moved together in the ancient rhythm of love and desperation. "I won't let her hurt you. I won't let anyone hurt our family." But even as he made the promise, even as they came together in the silver moonlight with their children sleeping peacefully nearby, Sebastian knew that the final battle was coming, and when it arrived, one of them might not survive it. The next morning brought a message that confirmed Sebastian's worst fears. It was delivered by boat, dropped off at the private dock by someone who vanished before security could respond. The note was simple, written in Evangeline's elegant handwriting. Choose, Sebastian, your empire or your family. You can't have both. Sunset. Come alone, or watch everything you love burn. Attached was a photo of the estate taken from the water, with red X marks drawn over the windows of the nursery. As Sebastian stared at the threat in his hands, he made a decision that would change everything. Some wars could only be won by risking everything that mattered, and Evangeline Pierce was about to learn that a man protecting his family was the most dangerous enemy of all. Chapter 8. The Price of Loving a Billionaire. The moment Sebastian Winters realized he would sacrifice everything for love was the same moment Evangeline Pierce made her most fatal miscalculation. She underestimated what a father would endure to protect his children. The sun was setting over the Atlantic when Sebastian stood on the private dock of his Hamptons estate, watching a sleek cabin cruiser approach through the golden light. He'd spent the afternoon making impossible choices, sending most of his security team away as demanded, leaving Serafina and the twins under Detective Reed's protection, with 2 guards hidden in the house, and preparing for a confrontation that might cost him his life. His phone buzzed with urgent messages from board members, investors, and partners. News of his sudden isolation had sent Winters Medical Enterprises' stock declining, and corporate rivals were already positioning themselves to exploit any perceived weakness. By tomorrow, he might lose significant portions of the empire he'd spent 15 years building. Sebastian didn't care. Some things mattered more than money, more than power, more than the respect of men who measured worth in quarterly profits. His family mattered more. Serafina mattered more. The chance to watch his children grow up mattered more than any business deal ever could. Right on time, Evangeline called as her boat approached the dock. She looked different, wild, desperate, beautiful, in the way of broken things that cut anyone who tried to hold them. Her usually perfect blonde hair whipped around her face in the ocean breeze, and her designer clothes had been replaced by practical black clothing that made her look like the predator she'd always been beneath the polished surface. "Let's get this over with," Sebastian said, his voice deadly calm as he watched her secure the boat to the dock with practiced efficiency. "Oh, Sebastian," Evangeline laughed, the sound carrying a note of hysteria that sent ice through his veins. "This is just the beginning." That's when Sebastian noticed the second figure emerging from the boat's cabin, a man he recognized from industry publications and business conferences. Damien Grayford, CEO of Grayford Industries and Sebastian's longtime competitor in the medical technology sector. A man who'd spent years attempting to undermine Winters Medical Enterprises through aggressive business practices and strategic poaching of key personnel. "Sebastian," Damien said with cold professionalism, "I apologize for the dramatic circumstances." "Not really," Sebastian replied, though his mind was racing to understand this unexpected alliance. "Desperation makes strange bedfellows." "Desperation?" Evangeline's laugh held a note of hysteria. "I prefer to think of it as liberation. Freedom from pretending your pathetic company mattered to me. Freedom from watching you waste your potential on someone beneath your station." "Beneath my station?" Sebastian kept his voice level while calculating distances and exit strategies. "Everything," Damien answered for her. "Your company, your reputation, your perfect little family. You see, Sebastian, while you've been playing house, Evangeline and I have been very busy. She's provided me with insider information about your company's vulnerabilities, and I've provided her with the resources to exploit them." Evangeline pulled out a tablet, showing Sebastian a series of financial documents that made his blood turn to ice. "Every patent you filed in the last 2 years, every research project, every confidential contract, I've sold it all to Damien. By Monday morning, Grayford Industries will own everything that matters about Winters Medical Enterprises. Corporate espionage is a federal crime. Sebastian said quietly. Only if someone's alive to press charges, Damien replied, producing a gun from his jacket. And sadly, it appears that Sebastian Winters is about to suffer a tragic boating accident during a romantic evening with his unstable ex-partner. Ex-partner? Sebastian felt rage building in his chest like molten lava. That's the story the newspapers will tell, Evangeline said, her eyes glittering with malicious satisfaction. Star-crossed lovers reunited, but unable to overcome their past. A murder-suicide that shocks Manhattan society. Very tragic, very romantic, very final. And what about the children? Sebastian's voice was deadly quiet. Oh, don't worry, Evangeline cooed with false sweetness. Someone will need to take care of those poor orphaned babies. Someone who understands the burden of raising children with such complicated genetics. The implication hit Sebastian like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to kill him and Serafina. They intended to take Arya and Elijah to raise his children as their own sick trophy of victory. You're insane, Sebastian breathed. I'm practical, Evangeline corrected. I loved you, Sebastian. I would have been perfect for you. The right background, the right connections, the right understanding of how our world works. But you chose her instead, so now you'll die with her, and your children will learn to call me mother. That's when Sebastian heard it, the sound that made his heart stop completely. A baby's cry, faint but unmistakable, coming from inside the boat's cabin. You brought them here, he said, horror and rage warring in his voice. Damien thought they might provide motivation for your cooperation, Evangeline said. Don't worry, they're perfectly safe, for now. Sebastian's vision went red around the edges. Whatever control he'd been maintaining, whatever strategy he'd been formulating, dissolved in the face of pure, protective fury. His children, his innocent, defenseless children, were crying in the cabin of a boat owned by two psychopaths who planned to murder their parents. Let me see them, he said, his voice barely recognizable. That's the spirit, Damien said approvingly. Family cooperation. I like that in a business partner. They forced Sebastian onto the boat at gunpoint, and what he saw in the cabin nearly brought him to his knees. Arya and Elijah were in a makeshift playpen, crying frantically, their little faces red with terror and confusion. They were unharmed but clearly frightened, reaching their tiny hands toward their father when they saw him. "Daddy's here," Sebastian whispered, his voice breaking as he knelt beside the playpen. "Daddy's going to fix this." "How touching," Evangeline said coldly. "Now call your little girlfriend. Tell her to come down to the dock alone, or the babies go overboard." "She won't come," Sebastian said, though he was already pulling out his phone with trembling hands. "She's not stupid enough to walk into a trap." "She'll come," Evangeline said with absolute certainty, "because she's a mother, and mothers are predictably irrational when their children are threatened." The phone rang twice before Serafina answered. "Sebastian." "Where are you?" The security team said. "Sarah, listen to me very carefully," Sebastian said, his eyes locked on Damien's gun while his babies cried in the background. "I need you to come to the dock, alone. Don't bring anyone, don't call the police, just come." "Sebastian, what's happening?" "Are those the babies crying?" "Just come, sweetheart. Everything's going to be fine." "You're lying," Serafina said immediately. "Something's wrong. I can hear it in your voice." Sebastian closed his eyes, knowing that his next words might be the last ones he ever spoke to the woman he loved. "Sarah, if you love me, if you love our children, come to the dock now. Please." The line went dead, and Sebastian knew with absolute certainty that Serafina would come. Because she was exactly what Evangeline had said, a mother who would risk everything for her children. "Excellent," Damien said approvingly. "Now we wait." The next 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Sebastian held his children while Evangeline and Damien discussed their plans with the casual efficiency of people planning a dinner party instead of multiple murders. They would kill Sebastian and Serafina, stage the scene to look like a murder-suicide, and disappear with the twins to a country without extradition treaties. Damien would return to New York in a few months with a tragic story about finding the babies and adopting them out of compassion. "What about the resemblance?" Sebastian asked, buying time while his mind raced through increasingly desperate escape scenarios. "People will notice that they look like me." "Children change," Evangeline said dismissively, "and people see what they expect to see. Poor orphans being raised by generous benefactors. No one will look too closely." That's when Sebastian saw her, Serafina walking down the dock toward the boat, her silhouette backlit by the setting sun. She moved with the calm confidence of a surgeon walking into an operating room, and Sebastian realized with growing horror that she had a plan. "Don't try anything heroic," Damien warned as Serafina approached. "One wrong move and the babies pay the price." Serafina stepped onto the boat with steady grace, her dark eyes immediately finding Sebastian and the twins, before assessing the tactical situation with clinical precision. "Let me hold my children." "I don't think so," Evangeline said, moving closer with predatory satisfaction. "They're perfectly fine where they are." "They're crying," Serafina observed. "They need their mother." "They'll have a new mother soon enough," Evangeline replied, raising her own gun. When had she gotten a gun? And pointing it at Serafina's chest. "One who won't abandon them when things get difficult." Something snapped in Sebastian's chest, some final thread of civilized restraint. "You want to know why she left 5 years ago," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the water. "Want to know the real reason?" "Sebastian, don't," Serafina warned. "She was protecting me from you," Sebastian continued, his eyes locked on Evangeline's shocked face. "She knew you were dangerous, knew you were unstable, knew you would do exactly what you're doing right now if pushed too far. She sacrificed her own happiness to protect me from your insanity." "That's not true," Evangeline said, but her voice wavered. "Isn't it? You're standing here with a gun, threatening to murder 2 innocent babies because you can't accept that I never loved you. You forged documents, staged photographs, and terrorized a pregnant woman into leaving the man she loved, all because your ego couldn't handle rejection." "She was wrong for you," Evangeline screamed, her careful control finally shattering completely. "I was perfect for you. I understood your world, your business, your needs." "You understood nothing," Sebastian said with quiet finality. "You never understood that love isn't a business transaction. You never understood that the right person doesn't need to be perfect for your world. They become your world." That's when Serafina moved. With the lightning-fast reflexes of a surgeon accustomed to life-or-death decisions, she lunged forward and grabbed the gun from Evangeline's hands, while simultaneously kicking Damien in the knee hard enough to send him sprawling. The next few seconds were chaos. Gunshots rang out across the water, but Sebastian was already moving, scooping up both twins and diving behind the boat's cabin for cover. When the shooting stopped, he emerged to find Serafina standing over both Damien and Evangeline, the gun steady in her hands while Detective Reed and his backup team swarmed onto the boat. "How?" Sebastian gasped, clutching his children against his chest. "GPS tracker in your phone," Serafina said, her voice shaky with adrenaline. "I've been tracking you since you left the house. Detective Reed and his team have been in position for the last 10 minutes. "You could have been killed," Sebastian said, torn between fury and overwhelming relief. "So could you," Serafina replied. "So could our babies. Some risks are worth taking." As police sirens wailed in the distance and paramedics checked the twins for any sign of harm, Sebastian pulled Serafina into his arms and held her like he never intended to let go. "It's over," he whispered against her hair. "It's finally over." But even as he spoke the words, Sebastian knew they weren't entirely true. The immediate threat was gone, but the fallout from Evangeline's corporate espionage had destroyed his business empire. By morning, he would be just another failed businessman whose company had collapsed under the weight of betrayal and bad decisions. Strangely, he found he didn't care. He had his family. He had his life. He had the woman he loved and the children who would carry his heart for the rest of his days. Everything else could be rebuilt. Everything else was just money, power, reputation, things that mattered only to people who had never learned the difference between success and happiness. Sebastian Winters had learned the difference, and he knew which one he would choose every single time for the rest of his life. Chapter 9. When Love Demands the Ultimate Sacrifice. The sound that shattered Sebastian's world wasn't gunfire or screams. It was the quiet clicking of handcuffs as federal agents arrested him for crimes he'd never committed. "Sebastian Winters," Agent Patricia Hartwell announced as she entered the hospital conference room where he'd been meeting with Detective Reed about enhanced security measures. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act." Sebastian rose slowly from his chair, his protective instincts flaring as armed agents filled the small room. "There's been a mistake. Evangeline Pierce was the one. Ms. Pierce has provided us with comprehensive evidence of your criminal activities spanning several years," Agent Hartwell interrupted, her voice professionally detached. "Financial records, digital communications, recorded conversations. She's cooperating fully with our investigation in exchange for reduced charges." The words hit Sebastian like physical blows. Even from prison, even facing multiple felony charges herself, Evangeline had found a way to destroy him. "You can't believe anything she says. She's manipulated evidence before." "The evidence is overwhelming, Mr. Winters." Agent Hartwell nodded to her partners, who moved forward with the handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." Sebastian's mind raced as the Miranda rights washed over him. This was impossible. Evangeline was in custody. Damien was dead from gunshot wounds sustained during the boat confrontation, and all the evidence of their conspiracy should have exonerated him. But somehow, impossibly, she'd turned the tables one final time. "Sebastian." Serafina struggled to get out of bed, still weak from blood loss and trauma. "This is insane. He's the victim here." "Ma'am, please stay back," one of the agents warned. "Sebastian," Serafina's voice broke as they led him toward the door in shackles. "I'll call Marcus. I'll get the best lawyers. "No," Sebastian said firmly, stopping in the doorway to look back at the woman he loved more than his own life. "Stay away from this, Sarah. Take the twins and disappear. Go back to Chicago, change your names, start over. I'm not leaving you. You have to." Sebastian's voice cracked with emotion. "If they're coming after me with this much fabricated evidence, they'll come after you next. They'll claim you were complicit, use you as leverage against me. Please, sweetheart, take our children and run." The last thing Sebastian saw before they dragged him away was Serafina collapsing back onto the hospital bed, tears streaming down her face as she clutched their sleeping babies to her chest. The federal detention center was a special kind of hell designed to break men who were accustomed to power and control. Sebastian's cell was a 6x8 concrete box with a narrow window that showed nothing but gray sky. His cellmate was a career criminal named Vicious, who took one look at Sebastian's expensive clothes and manicured hands and decided he'd found his personal entertainment for however long the rich boy lasted. "What you in for, pretty boy?" Vicious asked on Sebastian's first night, his gold teeth glinting in the harsh fluorescent light. "I'm innocent," Sebastian replied, which made Vicious laugh so hard he nearly fell off his bunk. "They all innocent in here, rich boy. Question is, what you supposed to have done?" corporate espionage, securities fraud, conspiracy. Sebastian stared at the ceiling, trying not to think about Serafina alone in the hospital with newborn twins and no support system. Damn, son, they really want you gone, don't they? Sebastian's lawyer was Jonathan Cross, a former federal prosecutor who specialized in white-collar defense and had a reputation for handling impossible cases. He visited Sebastian on the fourth day with news that made Sebastian's stomach drop. "They've filed a superseding indictment," Cross said without preamble, spreading documents across the small conference table. 17 counts, including RICO violations. They're claiming you operated a criminal enterprise designed to systematically defraud investors and steal proprietary medical technology. That's insane. How can they? The evidence is extraordinarily sophisticated, Cross interrupted. Financial records going back 8 years, encrypted communications allegedly from your personal accounts, witness testimony from former employees claiming you directed them to engage in illegal activities. Sebastian studied the documents with growing horror. These communication logs. I've never seen half these conversations. That's what concerns me most. The digital forensics are so clean, so perfectly organized, it suggests someone with significant technical resources and inside access to your systems. Cross leaned forward. "Mr. Winters, in 25 years of practice, I've never seen a frame job this comprehensive. Whoever did this had years to plan and unlimited resources to execute. What about Evangeline's cooperation? That's where it gets interesting. She's not just cooperating. She's provided them with what appears to be a complete roadmap of your alleged criminal activities, including details that only someone with intimate access to your business operations could know." Sebastian felt the walls closing in. "What are my options? Honestly, limited. The government has built a case that would convince most juries, regardless of your actual guilt. A trial would be expensive, lengthy, and could result in a life sentence if we lose." Cross paused. "There is one alternative." "She didn't know anything because there was nothing to know," Sebastian said through gritted teeth. "Mr. Winters, I need you to understand something." Cross leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "The evidence against you is incredibly sophisticated. Financial records, email communications, recorded phone calls, witness testimony from multiple sources. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were guilty. But I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've never seen a case where someone accumulated this much incriminating evidence while simultaneously being stupid enough to leave such an obvious trail. Either you're the most careless criminal mastermind in history, or someone spent years setting up the most elaborate frame job I've ever seen." "Evangeline," Sebastian said with absolute certainty. "Possibly, but proving it will be nearly impossible, especially with her cooperation with the government. Right now, we need to focus on keeping you out of federal prison for the next 30 years. That night, lying on his narrow bunk while his cellmates snoring filled the concrete cell, Sebastian made a decision that felt like tearing out his own heart. He couldn't fight charges built on such sophisticated, fabricated evidence, not when doing so would inevitably destroy Serafina's reputation and their children's future. He couldn't ask her to endure years of legal battles while prosecutors painted her as a co-conspirator. He couldn't subject their family to the media circus that would follow a high-profile trial. The letter he wrote the next morning was the most difficult thing he'd ever done. "My dearest Sarah, by the time you read this, I'll have instructed my attorney to negotiate a plea agreement. I'm accepting responsibility for charges I didn't commit because fighting them would destroy everything good in your life and our children's future. The evidence against me is overwhelming, even though it's fabricated. A trial would last years, cost everything we have, and subject you to scrutiny as prosecutors attempt to prove you were complicit in crimes that never occurred. I won't allow that to happen. Please don't attempt to contact me or visit me. Please don't wait. Take our beautiful children and build a life somewhere safe, somewhere far from the destruction of what I used to be. Find someone who can provide the stability and peace you deserve. I love you more than my own life, which is precisely why I'm setting you free. You protected me once by walking away when you believed it would save me. Now I'm protecting you and our children by ensuring my mistakes can't destroy their futures. Always yours, Sebastian. 3 days later, Sebastian stood before a federal judge and entered a guilty plea to crimes he'd never committed. The sentence was 15 years in federal prison. As the judge's gavel fell, Sebastian felt something inside him die. Not hope, because he'd given up hope the moment he'd been arrested, but the part of him that had believed love could conquer anything. Now he knew better. Sometimes love meant sacrifice. Sometimes love meant walking away. Sometimes love meant spending 15 years in a cage so the people you loved could be free. That evening, alone in his cell while news reports about his conviction played on the common room television, Sebastian allowed himself to think about Serafina one last time. He pictured her holding their children, maybe in Chicago with her family, maybe somewhere far away where no one knew her name or her connection to the disgraced billionaire who destroyed everything he'd touched. He hoped she was happy. He hoped she would find someone worthy of her love, someone who wouldn't bring danger and scandal into her life. He hoped their children would grow up strong and healthy and proud of their mother, with no memory of the father who'd loved them enough to disappear. The tears Sebastian cried that night were silent, invisible, and utterly heartbroken, but they were also the last tears he would shed for himself. Tomorrow he would begin the long process of becoming the kind of man who could survive 15 years in federal prison. A man with nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing left to fear. A man whose love for his family burned so purely that it would sustain him through any darkness, any trial, any sacrifice. A man who had no idea that the woman he'd tried to save was about to prove that some bonds are stronger than prison walls, federal charges, or even the ultimate sacrifice of walking away. Chapter 10. Love's Perfect Vengeance and Ultimate Triumph. The night Evangeline Pierce discovered she'd been outplayed by a woman she'd underestimated was the same night Sebastian Winters learned that true love never surrenders. It just becomes more strategic, more determined, and infinitely more dangerous. 6 months had passed since Sebastian's conviction, 6 months of him believing his sacrifice had protected the woman he loved. 6 months of Serafina allowing him to believe that lie while she orchestrated the most methodical takedown in corporate history. The Grayford Industries Memorial Gala was supposed to be Evangeline's triumphant reinvention, her emergence as the grieving widow and new CEO of Damien's combined empire. She entered the Four Seasons ballroom like a queen reclaiming her throne, elegant in black Saint Laurent. What Evangeline didn't know was that Dr. Serafina Cross had spent 18 months systematically unraveling the most sophisticated corporate conspiracy in recent history. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator announced, "we have a special presentation from Dr. Serafina Cross, whose investigation has uncovered criminal activity affecting our entire medical community." Evangeline's face went ashen as Serafina stepped onto the stage, commanding in midnight blue silk. She moved with the controlled precision of a surgeon about to begin a complex procedure. 18 months ago, Serafina began, a good man was imprisoned for crimes fabricated by someone we all trusted. Tonight, I'm showing you exactly how those crimes were constructed and who was responsible. The screens displayed financial documents, communications records, and digital forensics. evidence of a sophisticated, long-term criminal operation. "This is Elena Volkov's real voice," Serafina said as audio filled the ballroom, recorded during a conversation with Damien Grayford 6 weeks before Sebastian's arrest. Evangeline's voice, clear and damning, filled the room. "The beauty of this plan is that Sebastian will never see it coming. He trusts me completely. By the time he realizes I've been fabricating evidence for years, he'll be in federal custody, and I'll be untouchable." The crowd turned to stare at Evangeline, who stood frozen, her face white with shock and growing terror. "What Sebastian never knew," Serafina continued, "was that Evangeline Pierce died in a car accident in Colorado 7 years ago. The screens showed official death certificates and police reports. The woman you know as Evangeline Pierce is actually Elena Volkov, daughter of Viktor Volkov, a Ukrainian arms dealer wanted by Interpol. She's been using stolen identities for over a decade to steal American corporate secrets." The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs as security personnel moved to surround Elena, but she was already backing toward the exit, her composure finally cracking. "You can't prove any of this," she called out, her refined accent slipping to reveal harsh Eastern European undertones. "Actually, I can," Serafina replied. "While you were celebrating Sebastian's destruction, I was working with Agent Patricia Hartwell to build this case." Agent Hartwell stepped forward, her badge visible. "Dr. Cross came to us 14 months after Mr. Winter's conviction with compelling evidence that the case against him was fabricated. Our investigation uncovered a criminal network that has been systematically targeting high-net-worth individuals for over a decade," Serafina continued. The screens showed a complex web linking Elena to 7 other victims across multiple industries. Elena broke free and ran for the exit, her designer heels clicking against marble as she fled. But Detective Roman Fairmont was waiting in the lobby with additional agents. Elena ran straight into their arms. "Elena Volkov," Agent Hartwell announced as they led her away in handcuffs. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, identity theft, and treason." As the ballroom erupted in chaos, Serafina stood alone on the stage, tears streaming down her face. She'd done it. After 18 months of relentless investigation, she'd proven Sebastian's innocence. Now came bringing Sebastian home. The federal prison looked designed to crush hope. Gray concrete walls, razor wire, and soul-destroying despair. But when Sebastian was escorted to the visitor's room and saw Serafina waiting behind the reinforced glass, he felt something stirring in his chest. "You look different," she said softly, taking in his too-thin frame, his prison uniform, the hollow look in his eyes. "Prison will do that," Sebastian replied, his voice rough from disuse. "What are you doing here, Sarah?" "I told you to stay away." "When have I ever followed your orders?" Serafina smiled, and Sebastian felt his walls beginning to crumble. "Besides, I have news." She pressed a legal document against the glass. Sebastian's eyes widened as he read, "Order for immediate release and complete exoneration." "How?" he whispered. "Elena Volkov was arrested 2 nights ago," Serafina said, her voice strong with triumph. "Every piece of evidence against you has been discredited, all charges dropped, and you're being released immediately with a formal apology from the Department of Justice." "You did this." "We did this," Serafina corrected. "Your children miss their father. Arya says Dada now, and Elijah crawls everywhere. They need you, Sebastian. I need you." "Sarah, I don't have anything left," Sebastian said. "No money, no company, no reputation." "You idiot," Serafina said, tears streaming. "Don't you understand? You never stopped giving me everything I needed. You gave me your heart, your protection, your sacrifice. You gave me children who have your eyes and stubborn chin. You gave me a love so pure it sustained me through the hardest fight of my life." She pressed her hand against the glass, and Sebastian matched the gesture. I don't need your money or company, Sebastian Winters. I need you, just you, for the rest of my life. The empire I built is gone, Sebastian said quietly. Then we'll build a new one, Serafina replied with fierce determination. Together, better than before, because this time it'll be built on truth. Sebastian closed his eyes, overwhelmed. I love you, he whispered. I know, Serafina said, radiant with joy. I felt it every day, even when you were trying to protect me by pushing me away. 2 hours later, Sebastian walked out of federal prison, a free man, his arms full of the woman who'd moved heaven and earth to prove his innocence, and the children who squealed with delight at seeing their father again. 18 months later, Sebastian and Serafina stood in the same ballroom where Elena had been exposed, surrounded by wedding guests. Sebastian had rebuilt his empire as a medical foundation, providing health care to underserved communities. Serafina had returned to surgery at the Foundation's flagship hospital. Their children, now walking and chattering, carried rings in tiny silk pouches as they toddled down the aisle, faces bright with excitement. Do you, Sebastian Winters, take Serafina Cross to be your wife, to love and cherish in prosperity and adversity for all the days of your life? I do, Sebastian said, his voice unwavering as he slipped the ring onto her finger. I have loved her since the first moment I saw her, and I will love her until my last breath and beyond. Do you, Serafina Cross, take Sebastian Winters to be your husband, to love and protect, to fight for and stand beside? I do, Serafina replied with absolute certainty. He is my heart, my soul, my partner in all things. I will love him through any storm, any trial, any sacrifice that life may demand. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Sebastian kissed his bride with all the passion and devotion that had sustained them through years of separation, the ballroom erupted in applause. But Sebastian heard none of it. He was lost in the dark eyes of the woman who'd saved him, who'd fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself, who'd proven that love truly could conquer anything. Mrs. Winters, he whispered against her lips. Doctor Winters Cross, she corrected with a radiant smile. I'm keeping my professional name. I have a reputation to maintain. As long as you're keeping me, Sebastian said, spinning her around as their children clapped and laughed with pure joy. Forever, Serafina promised, and then forever again. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Sebastian Winters knew with absolute certainty that he was the most fortunate man alive. He'd lost everything that didn't matter and gained the only things that did. A love stronger than lies, more persistent than enemies, and more enduring than any empire built by human ambition. Some stories end with happily ever after. But the greatest love stories, the ones that matter, the ones that last, end with, and their greatest adventure was just beginning. The adventure of Sebastian and Serafina Winters was just beginning, and it would be the most extraordinary adventure of all.